All right. All right. So thank you all so much for being here today for this live Google Hangout chat brought to you by GLAAD and also the Trevor Project. Um, Today we have some folks with us. We have Cecilia Gentili. We have Charlie Kerr. We have Jack.
Ori.
Jack Ori, and we also have Maisha Forbes. So today we want to talk about Trans Awareness Week, and we also want to talk about Trans Day of Remembrance and talk about the importance of creating space to mourn all the lives that we've lost, but also to also create space to celebrate the lives that are lived and to look at all of the work that we're doing. I guess we'll just go down the line. I guess Cecilia, we'll start with you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing in the trans community?
Oh, hey, okay, thank you for having us first. Thank you, all of you, for being here. I'm super happy to be with you. My name is Cecilia Gentili. I work at Apicha Community Health Center. I run a program that is helping about 300 folks of trans experience to get connected with medical services, mental health services, and social services. I'm also, as I am a Latina, I am from Argentina, I'm very committed to help my own community. So I'm a board member for Trans Latina Network, and as a former sex worker, I'm also very committed with Persist Health Project, where I am also a board member.
Awesome, Charlie.
Sure. My name is Charlie Kerr. I'm a member of the Youth Advisory Council of the Trevor Project. Basically, we help Trevor to shape their messaging to really be most effective in reaching every community of LGBT people, as well as in doing projects for Trevor. The project I've been working on now for the past about 4 or 5 months is called Trans Across America. It's a nationwide map of trans health, housing, and legal resources. We've currently covered almost every state in the country. We should be finished within the end of the month, and that'll be posted up somewhere for the end of the day. I'm also a student activist, and I'm the president of Brooklyn College's LGBTA, and one of the people who helped to work to create a LGBTQ resource center at Brooklyn College recently.
Oh, that's awesome. Great work.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, awesome. Jack.
Sure, thanks, Teak. Thanks for having us, first of all. My name is Jack Ori, and I am a volunteer with the Trevor Project, helping to give support to LGBT youth, including transgender youth who may be in crisis, feeling suicidal, or just feel like they need someone to talk to. The Trevor Project's mission is to make sure that all LGBT young people feel supported and to help try to reduce the suicide rate in our communities. And I'm also a student. I'm studying for my master's in mental health counseling, and I hope to be able to provide counseling eventually to members of the trans community, especially transgender youth.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Misha, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi.
Hi, honey. All right, so tell us. So what we're doing is we're just going to quick intros and talking about. So tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing. I know, just saw you the other day. Was it yesterday? At the SRP Attorney and Advocates Awards, which you hosted.
Yeah.
And I know you've worked with them, and you also have your own organization. So tell us a little bit about the work that you do.
Okay. So my name is Misha Forbes. I'm a human rights activist, community leader, motivational writer. I'm actually the founder and executive director of Just For Us Gender Diversity Project, which was formerly Just For Us Transgender Empowerment Project, which is a not-for-profit advocacy and aid organization for people who are transgender, intersex, and gender nonconforming. I'm also a core collective member and board member at Sylvia Rivera Law Project, which is a legal aid organization based in New York City that provides social health and legal services for low-income people and people of color and transgender, intersex, gender nonconforming or transgender. I also lend my time to a variety of LGBT organizations in New York City, and I'm an advocate for HIV, AIDS awareness, and prevention.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So like we said earlier today, so this is Trans Awareness Week, and we really want to highlight all of the areas in which the work is being done for the trans community. There are a lot of intersecting issues around, whether it's race or gender or or issues around economic empowerment, around immigration, around mental health. So I wanted you all to talk about what issues really feel hit at home for you, what issues are really important, and why they are through your personal experience. Whoever wants to start.
Well, me, I'm working in a community health center. The problem that I face all the time is coverage from insurances around, hormone therapy, and also, always like, that fear that you have sometimes every time you make a referral, you're gonna refer somebody to a, I don't know, GI doctor,
Right.
you never know how they're gonna treat the patient and if they're gonna, understand what a trans identity is. So, I usually face like that every day. Problem with coverage, problem with coverage for hormones, coverage for surgeries, gender confirming surgeries, and the understanding of other providers, medical providers that are not outside us. So it's always a problem to find providers that are understanding of what a trans body is. And like the usual risk, like housing, being included in the workforce is huge. Everybody is looking for a job, and not many of us are getting jobs.
Yeah.
So that is what I say that I most likely see every day.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, we just had conversations about that, recently at the Attorneys Advocates Award, because GLAAD worked with SRRP on their medical campaign, and I know, Misha, you had spoken to that some too as well, about the work around medical coverage,
Yeah.
and the importance for trans people to have representation and have coverage.
Right. Well, right now, SRLP has worked tirelessly on a trans health campaign, solely so that to ensure that low-income transgender people and transgender people of color, also gender nonconforming people, that they have access to safe and affordable and affirming health care, because it's very important that transgender people get the medical care that they deserve, especially help this bill or this law that they're trying to implement will enable around goal attention. Uncomfortable situation for a lot of transgender people, depending on what they're going there for. A lot of providers also make it very uncomfortable for them as well to kind of talk about some of the health issues that transgender people face. Like me myself, I know that in a few years, although I am a woman who is of transgender experience, and I expect to be treated as a woman, but I also know that I want to walk into a healthcare provider's office and be comfortable to say, listen, I'm a woman with a prostate, or a man with ovaries, or and be comfortable and say that, and have a doctor be affirming in that, and say, yes, you are a man, or yes, you are a woman, but you also have such and such, and I would like to know if it's okay for me to check you. Have that conversation, and it's going to be affirming, and it's going to be respectful, so that we can feel comfortable to go back. Because a lot of times,
I don't know. I think we're having Mishik.
fear that going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me.
No, yeah, you kind of coming in and out, but I will say this, that I agree, like the medical aspect of our transition is so important, and it's really like one of the first steps that we have to, like, well, one of the first steps we have towards validation and protection, and when we're not being validated and protected in these environments, it often leads to people being ostracized and being isolated and being victims of violence, which is something that a lot of us are giving a lot of attention to today, being that it's Transgender Day of Remembrance. Charlie and Jack, can you speak to that too? What issues for the trans community are really important to you right now? Either
Uh,
one of you.
sure. For me, I'm kind of into it's sort of a corollary to what Misha and Cecilia were talking about, because for me, one of the things that's really important is mental health access. And I feel like one of the reasons that the suicide rate is so high is because a lot of transgender people think that, oh, if I go to a therapist or I go for mental health help, that they're going to treat me as the wrong gender.
Right.
That was a real concern for me. And one of the things I'm hoping to do within the next year or two through my school programs in the research lab, I'm hoping to be able to get some surveys out and do some research into what the perception of mental health services are for transgender individuals, so that we can perform better outreach and make sure that people who need those services, that want those services, can access them.
Hmm. Can you just talk a little bit about what do you think specifically it is that trans people need when it comes to mental health services? So I was having a conversation earlier today, and what I was saying to people is that we need to reframe conversations around trans folks and mental health, and so that doesn't pathologize trans people and saying there's so many trans people that need mental health services because there's something wrong with us. When what's wrong is that there's so much brutal, like, abuse
Right. Yeah,
in
definitely.
the world, and it's the reason why so many trans people are looking towards getting some mental health access.
Yeah.
So yeah, can you speak to that a little bit? What do you think it is? Like, what is it
Yeah,
for trans
I
people?
think that a lot of it is that we definitely don't want to pathologize, and I think that there's this feeling that, especially if especially for transgender people who are trying to go through some kind of transition process, that a lot of times there's just feeling like, because some of in some places, in a lot of states, you have to see a therapist to get permission to get on hormones or whatever you want to do, or surgery or whatever, that, oh, well, but I don't want to say that I'm crazy, which is not what we're going for. Definitely, that's a big concern. Another
Hmm.
big concern is that there's a lot of times that, because of the feeling of not matching your identity, not matching what everyone else thinks your identity is, can cause a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, a lot of anger. And I think that also for a lot of people, when they are thinking about all those things, they haven't come to terms with it, or don't fully understand it themselves. They may feel like, well, if I go and tell a therapist that, they're gonna look at me like I'm crazy, or they're gonna say
Right.
that. And so we don't want to we don't want people to think that we're pushing them towards mental health in order for them to be labeled as something. We want
Right.
them to be able that this is to help you be happy and live your life if you want to. If you want to take advantage of those services, but it's not because being transgender makes you sick or anything like that.
Exactly. Exactly. Charlie, what issues resonate for you?
One thing I've really been thinking about a lot about today is the number of homeless transgender youth that there are. New York City alone has luckily does have a little bit more on numbers than a lot of other cities do. And
Mhm.
we talk about sort of Trans Day of Remembrance as sort of a broad, it's about trans people generally, but we do have to keep in mind the biggest victims of violence and discrimination in the transgender community are, people who are living out in the streets, trans people of color, trans homeless youth, and
Right.
that I think we really need to make it a goal of the movement to prioritize the needs of those of our community who are the most at risk. I know I've been sort of, as a follow-up to a memorial service today we had on campus, we talked about putting together a drive not only for winter clothes for LGBTQ homeless youth, but also a drive to get transitions, gender expression supplies like binders, gaps, etc., because those things can be prohibitively expensive, and they can be very important for people's sort of sense of gender identity. And it's very hard to, afford a $200 binder when you're worrying about where you're going to sleep at night or what you're going to eat. And if you look at the issue of like homelessness, there are 42 shelter beds in New York City that are specifically for LGBT youth, and trans youth especially face a lot of danger in non-LGBT specific shelters. Yeah. So I think we really need to be doing a lot of advocacy around just building a better, safer environment for our youth who are, out on the street or at risk otherwise.
Yeah, and I think you're right. You're talking about being accountable and having to do more, and we're all associated with organizations and different organizations within the LGBT movement, and it really feels like there has been a shift in the consciousness of a lot of organizations around really looking at transgender lives and intersecting issues with transgender lives. So, being that you're all advocates and we're all doing this work, I wanted you all to maybe speak to that a little bit. How do you think these organizational structures are working in the advancement of trans rights? What's being done? What do you see being done, and how do you think things can be better? Whoever wants to start. Anything?
Oh, well, I think that one visibility in the having trans voices speak on trans issues, I think is very important. I think not allowing cis people to kind of narrate or dictate to us what it is that our community needs is very important. And so I think while they're awesome, these organizations are awesome and they do amazing work within the community. Right. I also think a lot of work needs to be put into when you say that you're inclusive of trans people and gender nonconforming people, that you really mean it, and that people can see that you mean it when they walk in the door. And I think, not just that, but also in the way that the programs are implemented. I think it's one thing for a cis person to say, oh, this is what a trans person needs, versus a trans person or gender nonconforming person saying, this is what I need. This is what I need. And also to speak about the mental health aspect of it. I think that, navigating through this world, mental health doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing that you need to see someone to talk to. I think it's very important to have someone that you can talk to, especially when you're navigating through this world of people who really don't understand you, who look at you like an other, who quite frankly want to hurt you because they can't understand why it is that you live the way you do, or why it is that you're asking for what you're asking for. You can't understand why is it that you're asking to be let alone. You're asking people to leave me alone. Allow me to walk the streets of my authentic self, and people are saying, no, I'm not going to do that. And I think, it's very, very disheartening and very troubling, and it causes a great amount of distress and trauma to a trans person or gender nonconforming person when they have to deal with that every day, and especially when they have to deal with that and then go out into the world and kind of navigate through the healthcare system, and then kind of navigate into these LGBT organizations who, quite frankly, some of them are not prepared for trans people. Though they want trans people and they want to do the work, they're just not prepared for trans people. And I think they can begin preparation when they start to really take great consideration in the fact that trans people and gender nonconforming people are experts in themselves and experts in their community, and know exactly what we need and know exactly what we don't need. Respect us enough to tell you what it is that we need.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
I think, it is great organizations that they're doing amazing work for the trans community, but what I see a little bit of flaws is trans is part of the LGBT. We are the T. When it comes to organizations that are not just trans, but they are mostly covering everything LGBT, I see a lot done for the G. I see something done for the L. I see mostly nothing for the poor B. And it's always forgotten, says, but we are part of the LGBT, we are the T. So I feel like it's much room for improvement, for all organizations that are LGBT. But it also goes on us to demand it. I go there and I go like, hey, I'm the T here.
That's right.
This is that. Hello.
Yes, I hear you, and that leads me into, I don't know if Charlie or Jack, if you want to chime in.
We pretty much covered, Cecilia and Misha have pretty much covered everything that I was going to say as well. I definitely agree, especially with that point about making sure that we reach out to trans people in our organization, so that we do a good job of outreach. I think is the most important thing, because a lot of times people see an organization that says LGBT and they see themselves, you mean gay, right?
Right. So moving forward, thinking about the organizations.
Trans and gay also. So.
Right, and there are some trans folks that are LGB, and that's the thing about our intersecting identities, and that we always, I think this conversation about trans people and gender is really starting to open itself up to having more nuanced conversations and more layered conversations around so many different things. And it also gets complicated, right? Because as if, like we were saying, today is Trans Day of Remembrance, and today we remember and we honor all of the lives that have been lost, all the trans folk people who have lost their lives to anti-trans violence. And it looks like, even though our visibility is increasing and the advocacy that so many individuals and organizations are doing on our behalf is increasing, the violence against transgender people is staying a constant. And so I'm thinking about what that is, and what's missing, and how do we fix it? What is it that we're missing?
Yeah. Well, I think that, and I hear it a lot. I hear it especially, it's something that I think I heard Lord's Ashley Hunter say, which was kind of a quote that she said, and she was like, you can't have a revolution without casualty. You look at it even with the civil rights.
I can't hear Misha.
Yeah, we just lost your audio.
What, Misha, you back? Hello? Hello?
Can I just say something?
Wait a minute, Misha, I can't hear you if you're talking. Can anybody hear Misha?
Yeah.
No.
No. Okay, Misha, wait a minute. Hold that thought. I'm gonna jump to Cecilia. Let her say something, and you work on, like, maybe redo your microphone. Okay, Cecilia, go ahead.
Just really short, because I don't want to. I want Charlie and Jack to voice, what they have to say. I think, like, in a way, we're having a great time. It's a lot of visibility. You have people adoring Laverne Cox, on TV. We have her in Time Magazine. We have, other transgender people that, came out and say, like, hey, I'm trans, and, I own this amazing company. We have writers, we have all of you guys doing stuff. We do have jobs. We are part of society. What is going on? What is the bridge in between, being part of society and actually being part of society, being included and being understood by society? I feel like it's gonna take some time, but I really do want to believe that we are on the way of, being included in the conversation, in normal conversation, but it's gonna take time, it's gonna take time. And I really want to know what Charlie and Jack want to say, because
Charlie, Jack.
Yeah, go ahead if you want to go first.
I was just going to say that I think we need to move, now that we have representation that's so great, and we have advocates like Laverne Cox, who are not only out there representing, but they're also activists. We need to start making we need to understand that, violence doesn't start when the bullet leaves the gun. It's, it's structural factors that create this kind of violence.
Yeah.
And I think we really need to start addressing, we need to really reach out to people and educate them. We need to build safe. We've created these great communities for ourselves, but now we need to make the rest of the world a safe space. We need to have better protections for trans people. We need legally. We need to have more resources out there for trans people who are at risk or otherwise marginalized, even more so than other trans folks. And we need to. It's one thing to look at an act of trans violence, and as terrible as that is, we can't see them as just horrible incidents. They're part of a broader pattern and a broader system of discrimination against transgender people, and that also intersects with other systems of oppression like racism and sexism and homophobia. And I think once we start sort of recognizing the systemic nature of this kind of oppression, we can start identifying the individual problems and working in our communities to make change.
Yeah, absolutely. Misha, is your mic back on? Misha, can I hear you say something? Oh, girl, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Okay, so yeah, Charlie and Cecilia, that makes a lot of sense what you both are saying. And I think it's important for us, like us having this conversation is great. Us talking to each other and us talking to the community and empowering one another is great. But what we have to realize, thinking about violence against trans people, transgender people are being killed by non-transgender people. So we have to start having conversations, and I think as advocates and people that work in organizations, I think it's so important for us to start reaching out to other organizations that are dealing with intersecting issues, like organizations that are dealing with women's rights. Trans women are women, so let's start making sure that trans women are a part of these conversations. Organizations that are dealing with the African American community or the Jewish community or the Latino community. There are trans people that are African American and that are Jewish and that are Latino, and we need to start having these conversations and starting building support in this way. And I really believe that is like the next step in our advocacy. We got ourselves together, and now it's about trying to like reaching across the aisle, so to speak. Because these conversations about trans rights and things, it's not just transgender people's responsibility to have these conversations, even though we should be leading the movement and all of these things, but it's also important for other people to kind of fall in line and be a part of the movement as well, to support us and to help stop the violence.
I think it's very important what Charlie was saying about not all acts of violence, fortunately, end in death. But we cannot overlook an act of violence that just happened, and the level of comfortability that non-trans people, cisgender people feel about attacking you. Why do you feel so comfortable to call me names or push me, or what make you feel so comfortable?
Yeah.
The right. But then it's also the question is like, should I engage in this kind of argument? Because you never know if it's not gonna escalate to something else. But as I said, fortunately, not all acts of violence against trans people end in death. Unfortunately, a lot of them do. But it is a lot of room of just violence that we cannot tolerate anymore, and you also have to think about protecting your life. So it's very hard when you have to choose, should I voice what I think about this, or should I just go quiet and keep my life, It is very hard. It is very hard to face that reality every day. The levels of anxiety that, it takes to get out of home every day, when you don't know how you're going to be perceived. You don't know if somebody's going to just feel free to attack you.
Right.
And then we go back to needing mental health. Because how do you deal with all these, me as a trans person, and I'm not talking as a provider, I'm talking as a trans person, I believe in therapy, therapy has changed my life a lot, and I've been able to deal with my anxiety, and how people is going to read me in the street or that. But it's not easy to not everybody can have the luxury to find, a therapist.
That's right.
And at the same time, when it comes to mental health, it's not just, I always think trans people not just, change their lives, but they change the lives of everybody around you, trans partners, trans family members, they need help to, cope with the whole transgender violence in the street. It's
Yeah.
hard. Sometimes I think how hard it's for my partner, to walk in the street with me, and sometimes get the
Mhm.
people,
Like,
what people may voice about me.
yeah, yeah. And anybody else before I chime in?
Yeah, I want to talk to that as well because I was just laying here thinking about it too, and I think that one of the things that's important, that's really important, is making sure that this is something we talk about, like, and obviously we all take it seriously, and or we wouldn't be here having this conversation today. But I think that a lot of times, things like violence, and I'm including in that violence against ourselves when we talk about suicide and things like
Yeah,
that,
absolutely.
like a hidden thing that we don't really talk about in our communities. And I think it's important to make sure that it's something that is explicitly talked about. And I think it's important as far as the kind of outreach that I do, and the youth advocacy and that kind of thing, that when transgender youth are considering coming out and they're worried about potential violence and things like that, that we need to be able to have those conversations with them and be able to talk to them realistically about what might happen and how they can prepare for it. And at the same time, we definitely do want to get with other organizations so that we can, like everyone's been talking about, kind of cut off at the roots the systemic problem.
Yeah. And that's so right, and it's so important what all of you are saying, because I think what sometimes can get lost, like Trans Day of Remembrance is an important thing, but it is an event, right? And it's an event that just happens one time in people's minds. But what we understand as trans people, particularly for trans women, is that the susceptibility to violence is something that is every day, like you were saying, Cecilia, every day when you walk out your house, that anxiety. And Jack, you're talking about the suicide. I think this type of violence that happens consistently is something I think is really lost on a lot of people that aren't living it every day. So I think it's really important that that we speak to that. And also speaking of violence, TDOR. Now I know you've done mental health work, and Charlie, you do student work, and Cecilia at Aperture. With the people that you work with and the advocacy that you do, are you running up a lot of dealing with a lot of people who are dealing with violence every day? Or is this like an anxiety that you see a lot with people that you interact with through the advocacy work?
Yes, I do. If it's not me that I experience an act of violence,
Mm-hmm.
when I go for a bad act of violence, sometimes it's just a comment in the
Yeah,
street,
absolutely.
If it's not me, every day I get to work, somebody is gonna tell me. When it's not many people telling me, like the kind of things that they go through in the daily basis, and
Mm-hmm.
it is just by strangers, sometimes by their own partners, sometimes by their own family, sometimes by the school system, sometimes from going to the ER, you know.
Yeah,
But I came to learn that going to the ER can be a very violent experience, you
yeah,
know.
absolutely.
So it happens every day. As I say in the video, it doesn't go one day by without me experiencing it my own or hearing it from somebody else that comes to me a picture with some kind of, story about that. And it's really hard to deal with that for me, as also, as a trans person that is a trans provider, it's hard for me to deal with that. It's very hard.
Yeah, yeah. Charlie?
Yeah, I mean, I think something Cecilia brought up, especially like the fact that the family, I think, can a lot of time be really a site of a lot of violence for a lot of younger trans people. I know
Yeah.
both in my student work and from what I've, encountered at Trevor, is that if you come from even a family, family that's not accepting is one thing, but a family who actively and violently tries to police your gender expression can just leave enormous scars for the rest of your life and
Mm-hmm.
really make it hard for you to transition and live, happily and successfully as a adult because, that trauma it's your formative memories. It sticks with you for a long time, and
Mm-hmm.
it's one thing to build sort of safe spaces to recover from that kind of
Right.
abuse treatment, but I think that we need to be doing everything we can to educate parents so that at the very least, if they're not, and family members generally, so that even if they're not, 100%, the best trans allies in the world, they at least know that their child's gender expression is legitimate and that they should be trying to embrace it as best they can and not police it out of the person, because it's not going to it doesn't work, and it's horrible to do to somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree, and I think this, expanding the idea of what violence actually looks like, and I think you two really talk to that a lot. Like, it's not just about this physical violence or like this brutality that you might encounter in the streets, but it's also, the comments that you may get from people who are supposed to love you, like from your family, right? It's these little comments that you may get from people, in the streets as you walk by. These little encounters of violence happens every day, and I think it's really important that we constantly give attention to those things.
Let's go a little bit farther. Sometimes comments from the same LGBT community, gender is always an issue. People can, do come to somehow good terms with, sexual orientation, but always when it comes to gender, sometimes the own LGBT community have a hard time understanding.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's hard, but that's why I believe that education is the key. Show that what we do, show who we are. I think we have powerful role models all over nowadays to kind of start changing the mentality of people around what a trans identity is. And I think we are on the way. It's gonna take time. It's not gonna happen tomorrow, but I'm happy that we do have great role models that that we can put out there. We are just doing amazing things like everybody else.
Yeah, I agree, and I also think the visibility. I think trans people being visible is really helping it change hearts and minds and things like that. But also, us being visible is also creating space for trans people who don't want to be visible to actually do that too. Like, it's about us creating space so that everybody can kind of live the lives that they that they want to. And also, what we're also doing, I think, is that the trans movement is lending itself to a larger conversation about gender in general, right? About femininity, about masculinity, about womanhood, about manhood, about maleness, about femaleness. And I think these really are like the foundations of the conversations we need to start having to really start to see like a shift in culture, because a reason that trans women, particularly trans women of color, are always the brunt of the violence is because of the violence against women. It's about this misogyny, and in the LGBT community, a lot of times some of the most virulent misogyny you get is from gay men, and you get this trans misogyny. So there's just so many different conversations for us to be having. And this is going to lead me into my last question. I kind of answered it for myself, but go ahead, Cecilia.
That is if you are in a position that you chose to go to one of the ends of the environment, to the ends of the spectrum, like, you choose to go to more to a masculine or a feminine spectrum. But, me, I feel like I'm dated every day, because every day somebody comes with a new trans identity that identify kind of like in the middle of those things. They have it really super harder than me, that I chose to go more closely
on the binary
spectrum. Identities that are as genderqueer nowadays, they have it even harder because people have really hard time understanding. And what is the best reaction to somebody that you don't understand? You attack it.
Right, and that's so important. And we, as trans people, and for trans people who identify on the binary, absolutely have to make more space for gender non-conforming people. For people that are more in the middle as far as who they are and how they identify. So this leads me into kind of the final question. What is it that we can do, thinking about us as a trans community, and the interdependence and inter-community work? What can we do within community to start to create safer environments for ourselves and for other trans people? What do we have to do? Like I've said a little bit. Can you all just speak to what do you think that we need to do to be better about the violence and the violence that we're all experiencing, not just about Trans Day of Remembrance violence, not just the murders, but every day the consistent violence that we are constantly up against that a lot of times leads to that ultimate type of violence. Anybody?
I think this is for me is a very difficult question, because I'm always like, and I'm talking as a trans person, as a provider, like, I'm always like, I like to make my point across, and I like to, confront people that feel comfortable with doing, some kind of violent thing. But I also learn to, kind of value my life to a point that, I stay away sometimes from comments or, gestures. What we can do, as I said before, as a community, is just keep educating, the public about how amazing we are. I know people that have a trans experience. They're not just beautiful in the outside, in the inside, but they do beautiful things, and they have, amazing stories. So I think part of the key of here, be educating the public about who we are and what we do, and we are nothing to be afraid of, and we are nothing to reject.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, thank you for that. Charlie, Jack?
Yeah, and I think to add to those wonderful comments, I think one of the things that's most important is to realize that acts of advocacy don't have to be huge things. We see these big problems and we think, how can we solve this overwhelming problem? And I think that a lot of times it comes with things that are simple on the surface, though not easy. Things like, if you have a member of your family or somebody or a kid somewhere that you're close to, or you're a teacher or whatever, or just a neighbor or person on the street, and you hear something like a little boy saying, "I'm trying not to cry," or a little girl saying, "I can't do that, that's for boys," or something like that, to just speak up to that person and say, hey, it's okay who you are. And those kinds of small things might not seem like much, but I think they add up to really helping people to be more accepting and more comfortable, and that's how we change things. I think that's an important part of education as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, Jack. Charlie?
Sure. I think you actually said something earlier that I think is really important, and that we need to sort of the trans community and the trans rights movement need to, I think, connect with other struggles that we all are still affected by. I think that if the trans movement as a body could get involved with, say, movements against violence against women, like you mentioned, or against police harassment, happening more broadly, I think it would both expand the conversation and help us act as allies, not only to people who are not trans, but to people within our own communities who might be facing different intersectional oppressions. And I think if we can sort of stop seeing issues as sort of separate and monolithic and more as the intersections of a bunch of different kinds of oppression, it would really help us create a stronger movement for everybody, not just for trans folks either.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. It's so important that people that are doing this work about intersecting issues are held accountable, and are getting their folks together and are also doing this work right with us. Yeah, that's so good. Okay, so I think we're going to wrap up. Thank you all so much, Misha. Thank you so much. I know you lost a connection, but thank you so much for being a part of this and for being a part of Trans Awareness Week and Trans Day Remembrance. Cecilia, I'm going to see you later at GMHC, and I'm sure everybody has their own Trans Awareness Week and TDR events to head to and to do. So thank you all so much for this conversation. Be safe and be well.
Thank you for having us. Thank you all for being here, Charlie, Jack, Misha. I love you all. Bye.
Yes, and thank you to the Trevor Project for partnering with us on this. Thank you so much. All right, bye-bye.
Bye.